Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil, TireRack.com, and RockAuto.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb. Welcome, everyone, to MotorWeek podcast number 274. I am John Davis. And before we get started today, we're going to pause to talk about something that has rattled all of us that work on MotorWeek and all of you out there, many of you out there certainly, that watch the show and listen to our podcast. And that is the recent and very unexpected passing of our master technician, Pat Goss. If you've been watching any of the recent episodes of the show, we announced it on air, and we've also said that because Pat was the consummate teacher, we had some unused segments of Pat, and we are continuing to use those up until the show 4133 that initially goes out on April the 23rd. And on that show, the central part of that show will be a look back at some of our time with Pat and some of his accomplishments. And it's a very, very fascinating look at a fascinating man. And we just want to let everyone know, and we've heard from so many of you out there that cannot believe what has happened and are mourning his loss with us. And we want to say thank you to everyone. And we're still basically regrouping ourselves at MotorWeek, trying to get our hands around this absolutely tragic event. You know, personally, and speaking, not only for me, but for everybody, Pat Goss was a dear friend of mine for 41 years. And that really is as obvious from the outpouring of emotion from so many of his fans. I'm not alone by any means. I'm probably one of millions. Pat was the kind of guy that not only made everyone he knew a friend, but that everyone that saw him on television or heard him on radio instantly knew he was talking directly to them and as a close friend. In person, as on the air, he was kind, incredibly generous, and of course, very knowledgeable about not only cars, but boats, almost anything that moved, and also technical. And when you really got him talking, he had pretty darn good advice about life as well. He came into my life and into the MotorWeek sphere in the summer of 1981, shortly after we got the go-ahead to start producing MotorWeek. And I asked him to be the wise mechanic on the show, but he quickly corrected me. Pat was a technician, and he believed that the knowledge level that was necessary to deal with the automotive world as it was then, back in the 80s, let alone now, required quite a bit of skill. And he really was very technical in his approach to his business. I told him that with this new show idea we had, MotorWeek, it might be fun for a few years. Who knew then that it would turn into more than 4 decades? When word of his passing got out, I, of course, heard from dozens of former associates that had worked with him at MotorWeek and Maryland Public Television, where we produced the show, and all of his radio and other television projects. And to a person, they wrote or told me about what an amazing talent he was. And I have to tell you, if you saw him work, you would instantly agree. He almost never used a written script or even cue cards or prompter over the over 1,000 Goss's Garage segments that we used on the show that he produced, that we produced with him. Sometimes he would have nothing more than an outline that he and the producer would dream up and a couple of props that we've got in. And that's all he needed. And off he'd go. And it was off the cuff, take after take, sometimes 4 and 5 times. And he could talk to whatever time was needed. If I had to sum up his talents as a talent, he was brilliant. But on the other hand, he was also so easy to work with. He was focused, but there was no ego. He was always extraordinarily respectful of the folks behind the scene, the crews. He wanted to help them do their jobs as best as possible. And I think in some ways that really sums it up. Pat Goss always cared more about everyone around him and the folks that were listening and watching him more than he cared about himself. Out of respect to Pat, we are planning to retire the active use of Goss's Garage after we pay our tribute to him on show 4133. It will still be living on our YouTube channel, and we basically may revisit some of the classic features somewhere down the road, but we'll be taking a different approach. There is no replacing Pat Goss, so stay tuned for any updates on what we might be doing. We do expect MotorWeek to be very active in the car care arena, but it just will be different. So for all of us at MotorWeek and at Maryland Public Television, and for many of his fans, rest in peace, Patrick. I and his millions of fans, I know everyone that's ever met him, we're all much richer having had him in our lives. And with that, I'm joined today on our podcast by Jessica Ray, Kyle Scanlon, and Alexander Kellum from our staff. And we're going to move on now and talk about the kinds of things that you tune in to our podcast for. Recently, Mercedes-Benz had a Tech and Innovation Day, and I'd like Jessica to take the lead on that.
Yeah, John. Mercedes, they really want to lead the way in tech. And I think we've seen that in the new S-Class after, we gave it our driver's choice for best luxury sedan. They really stepped it up. And it's one of those things that you kind of look at that car and you think about the potential of where that technology is going to go down the line, right? How often do we see new technologies in luxury vehicles? And, maybe a decade down the line, they eventually make their way into the typical consumer vehicle. Things like, I think about like blind spot monitoring, backup cameras, et cetera. So it's always interesting to see what, Mercedes has, what they're working on for their future product. And so this is a very big event. It had a lot going on. So I'm going to try and sum it up as best as I can. The first thing I want to talk about, they have something called automated valet parking, which sounds so pretentious, does it not?
It does. Sounds dangerous too.
Well, dangerous is not the word I would use. It is very, very, very interesting technology. And it kind of just goes to show off the technology more than maybe like how often we will use automated valet parking. But essentially what it is it's an infrastructure-based approach to automation. And what that means is that Mercedes partnered with Bosch, and Bosch sort of created this infrastructure in which the car can move around in, right? So they use cameras that are located all around. This specific instance would be a parking garage. And so they use cameras all around the parking garage to really monitor the area. And that gives you level 4 autonomy. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the different types of autonomy a little bit later. But for now, this gives you level 4 autonomy. And so essentially, because it's infrastructure based and it's using cameras around the parking garage to monitor the area, it's not relying on what the car is seeing. It's telling the car what the cameras are seeing, relaying that information, and telling the vehicle where to go. So because the infrastructure is capable of level 4 autonomy, the vehicle itself does not necessarily need to be capable of level 4. It only has to meet certain requirements that allow the infrastructure to successfully maneuver the vehicle. Because
So in other words, I'm going to stop you right there.
yeah,
It's basically saying if the garage is properly equipped, it will tell the car where to go
Yep.
instead of the car having to figure out where to go.
yes, because if you think about it, most cars right now, well, all cars right now, the highest tech, right, is level 2, which means they really only have cameras and radar. And that means they can only sense so far. And there's a lot of unpredictability in a parking garage.
Yes.
Making sure to be able to know your entire surroundings, the vehicle might not be able to do that. So it's kind of interesting that you could you could kind of use a vehicle that's equipped with only advanced driver assistance and turn it into level 4 autonomy using the infrastructure. So we got to see it demonstrated. It's very interesting. Of course, we saw it with demonstrated with an EQS. So, they talked also a bit about, the potential with, parking the car and, okay, well, that car, has to be charged. And so say, the car was at 100% charge and another car came in that needed to be charged. Well, we can automatically move the cars around once they're fully charged out of the chargers so that another car can go in.
That's a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to become an increasingly big issue with a limited number of chargers.
Yes. Yeah. So that was kind of the gist of it. There is a working commercial version of it actually in the Stuttgart airport in Germany. So I think that's really interesting and certainly something that we will be able to test, but not the average consumer. But it's just one of those things where you just get to see the potential for technology decades down the road.
Yeah, they've always been a leader in looking at technology, but the old phrase, everything old is new again. Back in probably the late 80s or early 90s, there was an attempt to put automation onto a highway up in Michigan. And it was a program being sponsored, I think, by Buick at the time, where they had sensors along a section of one of the interstates north of Detroit. And it did exactly the same thing you're talking about. It enabled a car that had reasonable amount of equipment to drive totally autonomously on this stretch. And the sensors were on the side of the road and they told the car what to do. Mm-hmm. But, it was a short-lived test. I don't really know how successful or was, because obviously the electronics were far inferior to what we have today. But to me, sometimes this makes much better sense, because it allows you to have cars with different capabilities still basically work together in some kind of automated situation.
Yeah.
So
that's a great segue too into kind of what I want to talk about next, which is the Mercedes Drive Pilot, which is a level 3 autonomous system that I was able to sort of sit in the passenger seat and see actively happen. Like I said, talking a little bit.
Why don't you stop and real quickly just give us a thumbnail difference between level 2, 3, and 4?
Yes. So level 2 is what is legal right now. Vehicles can be equipped with level 2 autonomy. It is, in a legal sense, advanced driver assistance, which means you have to be paying attention at all times. There are 2 different types of level 2 systems that OEMs have. One of them is hands-free, and other can you have to have your hands on the wheel. Most of them right now you have to have your hands on the wheel, but things like
the
Super
GM
Cruise,
and Ford systems that
correct,
have the maps programmed in, some highways programmed in.
Correct. And OEMs are doing their due diligence, which is mapping a lot of highway miles. I believe Super Cruise probably has the most, GM Super Cruise with over 200,000 miles mapped at this point. They are best used on highways. And currently in what the autonomous technology allows us to do. And that's just because the nature of cities is incredibly difficult to use any of these systems. Moving to level 3. Level 3 is what's the word I'm looking for? Conditional autonomy, which means that it has the ability to completely control the vehicle at certain moments, but there has to be a driver, and you also have to be able to take back control of the vehicle anytime the vehicle tells you that you need to take it back. So in a level 3 system, if that system is on and working, the liability is on the vehicle and not on the person. Until that turns off and redirects back to you, the car is ultimately responsible for the actions being taken. Now, I will say there's a lot of asterisks here, because right now level 3 is anything that's able to be used on a road anywhere in the world, which currently it's only certified in Germany, but it is under 40 miles per hour. It's under optimal conditions, specifically like highways. It can't be used in rain. It's really not used to even go on, if you're on a highway, go off on an exit. I mean, it's really mostly just to go in a straight line right now. But if you're the type of person who commutes in traffic, this is actually incredibly handy. So, and let me go a little bit into specifically what level 3 means for the vehicle in which we tested it in. So Mercedes had a modified S-Class. And so this S-Class was equipped with a ton of radar and sensors, quite a few cameras, and also LiDAR, which LiDAR is incredibly important because that is how, the pulses that it sends out to really see what is in front and around a vehicle. And it was really interesting because all 3 of those paired together, you have to have that for level 3. You must have that because there also has to be some sort of redundancy, right? It always has to be covering itself if the vehicle itself is liable for the decisions that are being made. Because if one system fails, another system needs to be able to take over the monitoring and be able to confidently monitor at, say if a sensor is blocked or a camera is blocked or something along those lines. But it was really interesting because you got to see in the dash cluster, where every vehicle was in front of you. It showed you sort of the S-Class driving along, and every single vehicle. We were stuck in some LA traffic, probably going about 35 miles an hour. So it was really the perfect use case, of course, for this system. And so very easy to turn it on. It tells you when it's even all of the conditions are met for it to turn on. You can't just turn it on like a normal level 2 system. It has to actively be aware that it is legally able to drive and all the conditions are met. And so you turn it on, it sees everything that's going on. You take your hands off the wheel. You want to watch a movie in the infotainment area, feel free. You don't have to be paying attention. So it was really, really interesting to see it. I felt like it did not hesitate at all in the 30 minutes I was driving with it, and very, very confident. And so you might be thinking, well, how does this step from level 3 go to level 4? What does that mean? Level 4 is really essentially the vehicle being able to drive itself completely autonomously. Just with a driver has to be in the seat. The engineers I talked with at Mercedes essentially said the biggest leap is going to be from 3 to 4, not 4 to 5, 5 being complete autonomy. But the biggest jump will be from 3 to 4 because essentially in 4, the vehicle has to be able to drive itself at all times. And like I said previously, the city driving is going to be the trickiest thing to program an AI to do. It's going to be incredibly difficult, and we have no idea when it's going to happen, that we will even be able to do a level 4 system successfully, like that could drive everywhere and not just in a very small use case. But I imagine it's going to be many, many decades. Very interesting to see this technology in person and working, but it very, very clearly in its infancy. But certainly, I felt very confident in it. I didn't feel scared at all. But also, you have to take back control if the car tells you to, or it comes to, I should say, if you don't take back control when it asks you, you have to. The vehicle itself comes to a complete stop.
I cut you off. You were also getting ready to describe one other thing you saw at the Innovation Day. Do you remember? Let me ask
it's a lot.
Kyle and Alex.
I know I've been chatting.
Would you feel comfortable in a car today that did all the things that Jessica was talking about?
I mean, I've driven a fair amount of the vehicles, or I drove, every vehicle that we get, but all the ones that I guess would have the tier 2.
Mm-hmm.
And certain vehicles I'm more comfortable than others. I don't know if you want me to name names on them right now. I will. But yeah, I found obviously the more luxurious vehicles seem to have the better systems. One manufacturer whose system I really enjoyed was Acura, driving it down to Roebling. Had the TLX, which I believe everybody loved that we had for the past year or so. And the system in that car was absolutely fantastic. There was a period of time where, I had to have my hand on the steering wheel at all times, but I didn't really have to give any driver input. And there was one point when I realized I hadn't even touched the gas or the brake pedal for 3 hours.
Wow.
And the car was, keeping perfect distance with whatever vehicles were in front of me, or if there were no vehicles in front of me, going up to the, whatever speed I had the cruise control set at. And that car I was very comfortable in. Now, on the other side of that, there are cars that we have had that have the tier 2. I believe it would be considered the tier 2. And the system just isn't as refined. The car would seem to be bouncing back and forth in the lane from left to right, at sometimes seeming a little uncomfortable if you're driving next to a tractor trailer, and
almost
the
like
car's
a
on
jitter
the left
in the
side of
steering.
the lane, and it doesn't quite read where the lane marker is on the right. And it seems like the car moves itself over to then find that lane marker again. And it would get, honestly, a little nerve wracking from time to time. So it really depends on the vehicle. I'm comfortable with some tier 2 systems now. The idea of jumping to 3 and or 4 definitely has me a little rattled. I know, John, you like to say this about me on most of our podcasts, and you find it funny that I have more of an old school mentality than most people my age when it comes to vehicles and how they operate, and the computer systems that are kind of taking over most vehicles nowadays. But it really depends on the system and the manufacturer, in my point of view. But I have driven tier 2 systems that I am extremely comfortable with, and even systems that when you turn on the blinker, it will change lanes for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some amazing stuff going on out there when it comes to this kind of autonomous self-driving vehicles. But I still have yet to completely cast my vote. I'll put it like that.
Alex, anything to add?
To answer the question, would I be comfortable? The short of it is no, but I think I could learn to be.
It's honest.
Yeah, I sit in traffic, 695 traffic every day. Part of the reason I wake up at 5:30 in the morning to go into the office is to skip all of that. So if you're telling me automakers are making it possible where I can leave my house at 8 o'clock and I might get stuck in traffic, but I don't really have to do much. I'm all for it. I think that's great. So I don't want to take away from that. And I think eventually I could be comfortable with those systems. But to kind of piggy off of what Kyle was saying, There are some cars where, yeah, it's just not there. And some of the cars that I've been driving recently, it won't pick up on the lines. It won't necessarily pick up on other vehicles, I guess. And, that kind of flares up my anxiety a little bit. And I'm like, this ain't it, Chief. So I like being in control. You also get into the whole, this is really going far beyond, but it's the whole like legality thing of like, well, what happens if there's an accident? Like Jessica was saying, at a certain point, there's the whole, like, the car is in control. And I get that. But me, again, the anxiety being like, oh man, I should be in control of this just in case. So that's just where I am.
I think it's a very human response.
I mean, yeah, I think I got to experience it, right? I got to actually sit in it, see how it worked. So for me and the technician, the Mercedes person that I was with really talked a lot about trust, right? Because you have to build this trust between the driver and the car. And, I will say some of my final comments on it will be, it's like, well, when do we even expect this system to even be used? Currently, it's not even legal to be used as a level 3 system in America. So when we were driving it, he showed me the capabilities, but he had to keep paying attention the whole time. He couldn't just not pay attention. So like in some instances, I was the one sort of pressing on the media because he legally was not allowed to. But it is legal, and Mercedes is certified for it in Germany, and they are now looking to get the certification here in the US. Specifically, they have to do it individually by every single state, because every state has different rules when it comes to the rules of the road. So right now they are focusing on California and Nevada. So they are currently mapping, I think they've mapped about 50,000 miles in California and Nevada, and are currently working with California regulators to get the certification needed, so that hopefully, I mean, they kind of said maybe by the end of the year this would be possible for consumers. We will see. I will say, well, I think I showed John a picture of the incredible processing power that this vehicle had in the trunk of the S-Class. It was literally just full of cables because it needs to get about 30 gigabytes worth of, I think it was like 32 or 34 gigabytes worth of data every minute, which if you don't know too much about how much data we consume, say for like a Netflix movie, I think they said it was like 20 times, maybe more than 20 times what it takes to stream a movie on Netflix. I think it's even more than that. So anyway, so yeah.
Whoa.
Well, I know. I went on and on.
That was a lot to take in.
There's a lot to talk about there.
Oh yeah.
Well, I do want to bring us back to the here and now a little bit. We did want to cover on this podcast 2 vehicles that we've just recently head into the shop. Kyle, I'm actually going to start with you. The 2022 Ford F-150 Raptor, which seems about as far away from what Jessica's been talking about as it could be. But when you think about it in the future, something like the Raptor to navigate off-road conditions could be very practical. But anyway, the F-150 Raptor as it is today.
All right. Well, I love talking about trucks.
Especially Ford trucks.
Yes, I am an F-150 owner. It is my daily driver. One of the things I always find interesting getting into a Raptor or, its main competition, the Ram TRX, is how wide they are. It is definitely a very steep learning curve when you get on highways, freeways, any congested roadway at all, really. And just those extra inches, they really take up a lot of space in the lane where you can, if you're not used to it and you're especially not used to being in a truck at all, it can be very intimidating, to be honest. And you can be very worried that you're going to hit things that you're going to be a lot closer to than you're used to. But anyways, let's jump right in this. So we had the Raptor not too long ago, and not a whole lot of new information going on there. Running the same 450 twin turbo 3.5 liter EcoBoost V6 that they've been running in it for years. Excuse me. one of the things they did to try to fight, in my opinion, fight against the TRX a little bit, is they put a new 3-inch exhaust system on it to give it some better noise. And I got to drive this on the track. I got to drive it on the off-road section that we use as well. And it definitely, the noise was fantastic. I couldn't put it on Baja mode. I believe the map knows that you're not in the middle of the desert, so it won't actually let you do it. But I kept trying. It would only let me go in the highest sport version that was directly under Baja. But there isn't a whole lot of news going on with this Raptor. Same twin turbo V6 that they've had in it for years. But the exciting news is hopefully later this year, rumors are they're going to be announcing and or revealing the Raptor R, which will have the Mustang GT 500 760 horsepower supercharged V8 in it. And last May, I was lucky enough to drive the new 2021 GT 500 at New Jersey Motorsports Park. And that thing is a beast. And having just the visceral experience of that loud growling V8 with the beautiful whine of their superchargers, which sound fantastic, you were able to throw that in the Raptor. And the rumors as well is that it's only going to cost another $5,000 to get the R versus getting the regular Raptor. Now, do I believe that? Not 100%, because you're looking at over 300 extra horsepower for $5,000. So dollar per horsepower ratio is not that high, but it will definitely light a fire under Ram, because that's 58 more horsepower than the TRX is currently at. So we could be seeing, as everyone's talking about things being more economical, and with gas prices the way they are, having two big half-ton trucks with over 700 horsepower gas guzzlers in them might not have the biggest market right now, but it will be extremely exciting. And I really hope to get behind the wheel of one of those Raptor Rs one day soon. But other than that, there's really not a whole lot of new information in the Raptor world, as much of it has stayed the same over the past couple of years.
Well, we'll see how many they end up actually building, because I've been hearing some rumors that emissions regulations will be rising within the next year. So that means there very well could be stricter penalties for OEMs. Even if Ford has the Mach-E and also tries to sell as many Maverick hybrids and Escape hybrids as they can.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, we've already seen a little bit of a tightening of those restrictions as well. I believe, speaking of Ford, the Mustang has lost, I think, 10 horsepower this year for the V8s, and that's already because of a little bit of restrictions. So yeah, I can definitely give credence to that. We'll probably see more.
Alex, do you have any impressions on the Raptor? That was your first exposure to it.
Yes, that was my first time driving a Raptor. Not really a truck guy, but I am a Ford guy. And I'm also an orange guy, and it was code orange, which that was a pretty nice color, like that. So yeah, I was talking to my dad about it because I brought it home. I had to show him because he's a big truck guy, Ford guy, and he fell in love with it. He was enamored. I give him a ride and everything. And his point was, they've been going to dealerships constantly. They finally got their Bronco, and whenever they're there, they look at the trucks just for fun. And you see how expensive a lot of trucks are going for now. And he says, like, I never understood, like, how you could spend that kind of money on a truck, so on and so forth. But then he sits inside of them and he gets it. And he commented on, you see how much the Raptor goes for, and compared to some of these other trims like King Ranches and like going all out with them, it's really not too unreasonable, for lack of a better term, like in a relative sense. And I have to agree. I thought the interior, what you got with it, was very comfortable. It was very nice. It was full of a lot of maybe gimmicks, like, the whole Baja mode thing. Like, yeah, it's a little gimmicky, but as far as gimmicks go, like, it's a pretty awesome one. So who cares? Stuff like that. So yeah, I liked it. I'm just not a huge truck guy, so I don't have like a good comparison point with like the TRX because I never drove it. So I can't make that sort of claim. But yeah, 2 thumbs up. I liked it.
Pretty imposing vehicle.
Oh
Hey,
yeah.
let me stick with you because you've got the other vehicle we wanted to talk about on this podcast, and that was the 2023 Mazda CX-50. So tell
Yeah.
us what it is and what it isn't.
Yes. So the CX-50, I should preface this by saying Mazda brought us out to Santa Barbara to try it out. And the big thing on everybody's mind, my own included, was, is it just an off-road version of a CX-5? And that sort of gets into what you just asked. The CX-50 is, for all intents and purposes, think a CX-5 that's built for the off-road. Like that's probably the easiest way you can put it. But what it really is, Mazda made it clear that the CX-5, to them at least, is their sort of like mid-size or smaller like SUV that's built for the urban lifestyle, is what they kept referring it to. Whereas the CX-50 was their attempt at taking the similar, like a similar, I'll get into the dimensions of it later and everything, but basically a similar size package, and making it more for the weekend adventurer, the person that wants to get a little more, off the beaten path a little bit. And of course, that kind of aligns with a lot of the trends we're seeing, more like overlanding is a big thing. I mean, people have always liked going outside. Not really me, but, a lot of people like to go outside. And that's what it's meant for. I commented in my video that I did on it that it's not meant to take you like on the Rubicon Trail. And obviously I'm going to stand by that. Mazda's not making this as something that's a serious, like true 100% off-roader, bouldering, all that stuff. But it's meant to get you, as they put it in the presentation, like the last few miles to your campsite, right? Gravel roads, a little bit of standing water, rocks, things like that. When we were there, we were paired off with essentially the highest trim you can get, the 2.5T Premium Plus. That's barring the Meridian package. I'm not sure when that's coming out. It'll be not immediately available. That's kind of all we were given timeline wise. That package is going to have like off-road tires and a whole bunch of stuff like that. But forgetting that for now, yes, we drove the 2.5T. The T signifying for the turbo, and it was a little weird in the presentation. Actually, they're presenting it as this more like off-road capable, again, if you want to think of it like this, more off-road capable version of the CX-5. It's wider, it's a little longer, and it surprisingly sits a little lower, which is not what I expected from something that's supposed to be more off-road capable. Horsepower wise, they made a distinction between, the naturally aspirated version and the turbo. The naturally aspirated, 187 horses, 186 pound-feet of torque. The turbo, however, can do regular or premium, and on regular, it's like 225, or I have it right here, 227 horses. Yeah, so close enough, and 310 torque. 256 on premium, 320 torque. And yes, we were given premium gas in our premium turbo, so we really got a feel for that. I had a question.
So I know we were talking a lot about how it's like this, the CX-50, the CX-5. Is it built on the same platform as the CX-5? I thought it was built on the CX-30's platform.
It's a CX-30 platform, isn't it?
I thought it was sharing the same platform as the CX. I know it shares the same powertrain. It's still the 2.5 liter,
right.
It's standard all-wheel drive. I was under the impression that it was the CX-5, but it could be the CX-30. That I actually
I think it's the CX-30 platform.
It is,
and that would make sense.
Yeah,
which is a very important platform for Mazda. It's their global platform that they. It's also, I believe, the MX-30, and then some other stuff is built on it. So, but it is technically a little bit smaller. So it is very interesting. So I just find it kind of interesting, in that they wouldn't use the CX-5's platform for.
Well, I think it's a newer platform.
True.
And it's all about modularization these days.
Yes.
But I think you both are kind of dancing around a central question for buyers. If you walk into the showroom, which one do you choose?
Yeah.
And we all know that from past experience, they'll probably eventually replace the 5 with the 50. But for someone going in a month from now, when they're both sitting there, how do you make up your mind?
Whichever one looks better to you.
Yeah. It definitely looks. That's part of it. But no, I actually wanted to talk about that because that was the big question. I mean, like during the presentation, it seemed like half the questions were, well, what about the CX-5? Where's the CX-5 going to go? And then even, you know, at the little like reception and we were sitting at lunch, I was talking to some people and they all agreed like, oh, the CX-5 is done. It's done. It's out of here. Because I'm me, I'm going to go against the grain a little bit. And I'm going to say not necessarily. So Mazda made it very clear that to them, I said this earlier and I'll say it again, the distinction is that the CX-5 is built more for the, again, in their words, urban lifestyle. And then the CX-50 is more for, again, the weekend adventurer, someone who still needs something on the highway, something they can commute with, but and something that can get them, you know, to their campsite, things like that. So in theory, there is a distinction between the two. And I think because of that, Mazda will say, all right, the CX-5, we're going to keep making it. I'm not sure if it's their most popular model, but it is definitely one of their most popular models. They sell a lot of them. They sell.
It's it's definitely close to their most popular model. I do know that the CX-30, when it came out, was killing it a lot.
Sure. Yeah.
But there's
so
something else. There's something else here too. You've got the CX-5 sourced from Asia.
Yes.
An older vehicle. And you've got the CX-50, which comes out of the new Toyota Mazda plant in the US, newer vehicle, newer chips. You know, you have to think about the supply aspect as well. And no dealer, right. Every dealer will tell you we can't have enough SUVs right now.
And there also is the potential hybrids coming as well, right. Which I think in the next 5 years is going to be very, very important for sales. And the fact that Mazda does not have a hybrid at all in their lineup is a very big weak point.
Yeah. And I was going to touch on that a little bit, but yeah, basically, if you walk into a dealership now, I think Mazda will say like, yeah, there's this distinction between the two. And I think that the CX-5 will see it for at least another generation, maybe two, but probably just one. That being said, for the consumer, I don't think there's that much of a distinction. And I think most people will go into a dealership and say, do I want to get the one that can get me around the streets and everything, but doesn't have as much versatility? Or do I want to spend, it's a little bit more than the CX-5, typically anywhere from like $1,000 to $3,000 more. So not a huge step up, but it's, there at least. But I think most people will say, why not get the one that's more versatile? I mean, you look at like the cargo space in it. I know the car's a little wider and things like that and a little longer, but the cargo space super deep. So you get all that. And the first thing we said, it's looks. I mean, the CX-5, I know it has recently gotten a little bit of an update, but it still in some regards feels maybe a little dated, not terribly so, but just a little bit. The CX-50 though, it's all new. And I got to tell you, like driving it around, like it felt cool. It was like, I'm in an all new thing. It looks great. It feels great. It's certainly
it looks good too.
Yeah.
Hey, I think we need to move along. We did want to get in a lightning round in our YouTube question of the week before we wrap things up. So let's hit the lightning round first. Thank you, everybody, for your reports. They were incredibly in-depth this week. Stellantis, who we used to know as Chrysler folks, has announced the arrival of a new engine. It's called the Hurricane. It's a 3-liter twin-turbo inline 6. Shocker. That will be used in both standard output and high output applications. Probably going to replace the 5.4-liter Hemi. Engine's supposed to be 15% more efficient than its V8 predecessor, 400 to 500 horsepower. Looking for it coming into the Wagoneer. Is this much needed, this kind of expense, or is it an engine that's too late given we're on the eve of electrification? What's going on here in the mindsets of Stellantis? I can see, Jessica, you're just biting the bit.
I've got thoughts. I have thoughts. I mean, first, I love the name. I think Hurricane is such a cool name for an engine. Many of you know, and I've driven quite a lot of Jeeps in the last year, specifically the Wagoneer. I actually last week just drove another Grand Cherokee, and I've driven like 3 Grand Cherokees so far. Anyway, I think one of the things that disappointed a lot of people, say with the launch of a brand new platform, brand new Grand Cherokee, even the Wagoneer, was that like the powertrains were kind of the same as before, and not just like these are similar powertrains, but they're also gas guzzling powertrains. We're talking about the Wagoneer here that gets already terrible gas mileage, and we're putting really some older V8s in there. We've also seen, this is a move that Toyota has made as well, putting twin turbo V6s in their large SUVs instead of V8s, specifically for efficiency reasons. But I think, is it a little too late? As long as this does mean that their vehicles are more efficient, their larger vehicles are more efficient, but also that the potential for electrification in the future, whether that means a mild hybrid system, potential for the Wagoneer to be a 4xe, or even a pure hybrid, which I am very pro pure hybrid. I want to see more hybrid SUVs. I know they aren't exactly practical, maybe sales wise, but I want to see better fuel economy in large SUVs, because I don't think all electric versions are quite practical for a majority of families quite yet. I think it's a move in the right direction, and I'm certainly excited to drive one.
Kyle, inline 6 sounds like a throwback.
It does. I mean, when it comes to throwing it in a vehicle like the Wagoneer or something like that, I'm for it. I am. If they're going to start throwing that into their trucks and taking away the Hemi from guys that I know that have Hemis, they don't want to let them go. They don't at all. And it was like talking about the Raptor a little bit. It's just a V8 is just an experience, and there's nothing that can match it. No 6-cylinder, no matter what configuration, no matter turbos, no matter what. You can't match that feeling. It has a rumble. It grunts. It has a throaty noise to it, and it's just a V8, and they're just great. I love them. Now, do I love it right now with gas prices? No, I don't. I try to drive my V8 as little as possible right now. I'm actually fighting people over our long-term Prius if I have to drive home and back. But I mean, I have a lot of mixed feelings on it, because I understand the direction they're heading, and it makes a lot of sense. And 15% more efficient, that's a lot of dollars right now. If you're talking about you have to spend 15% less money on gas than what you're spending, if you're someone like me who has still been commuting into work 3 to 5 days a week for the past 2 years and has needed to be spending that money out of pocket, I would love to save 15%. That would be fantastic. Now, are they too late? I don't think they're too late. I think this is a really good move on Stellantis's part, and just moving towards more efficient vehicles. And if they're throwing it in the Wagoneer and the Grand Cherokee and stuff like that, I think it's fine. You start trying to replace, truck engines with this i6, you're going to start getting in my opinion, you're going to start getting a lot of backlash from hardcore truck guys that love their big honking V8.
I want to tell you, Ford's been very successful at doing it in the F-150.
Oh, and I know they have, and
very successful.
But then I also know a lot of people that were Ford owners that are friends of mine that no longer have Fords because they want the V8.
Yeah, Alex,
so
anything on
that
this?
Success, but that's also in my experience of my off-roading wilderness driving buddies. So
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Alex.
Oh, no, you're fine. But yeah, that's really all I have to say on the fact.
Yeah, so love a good V8, good branded juice, all that. But the thing is, I don't think it's too late. To answer the question, I don't think it's too late to be making engines like this and putting them out there, because yes, we're at the eve of electrification, and a lot of brands have said, like, by 2030, that seems to be kind of like the magic year, at least from everything I'm reporting, that's when they want to have a rich portfolio of electric vehicles, if not an entire portfolio. But that being said, we still have to get there. A majority of cars on the road are still ICEs, and a lot of people are still comfortable with ICEs. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't move towards electrification or anything like that, but with regards to engines like this, like, yeah, I think we need these in the meantime. I think people will be happy with them. And, it's not like they made the Hurricane overnight. It's probably been in R&D for a number of years. So what are they going to do? Like, not put it out? Like, no, of course they should put it out. And I think vehicles like the Wagoneer could greatly benefit from it. I don't want to see it replace Hemis and Chargers and Challengers and things like that. But I mean, that's a whole nother story. So,
there is a lot of history to the Hurricane name. The Willys and Jeep, well, at first Willys and then later Jeep, they had a Hurricane inline 4 and then an inline 6, which they called the Super Hurricane. So back in the 50s, that was a very familiar name to Jeep owners. Anywho, let's move on to our last item today, our YouTube question. Is it true that insurance is substantially more expensive for electric vehicles than for comparable internal combustion engine vehicles? Who would like to take a stab at that?
Well, I think the word substantial is not necessarily true. There is definitely an increased price for an electric vehicle when it comes to insurance, mostly because, well, the vehicles themselves are more expensive. The components in them are expensive, batteries, etc. So yes, they can be more expensive than their internal combustion engine counterparts. It's all relative. But I think when you think of the lifetime ownership of a vehicle, you're going to be paying less when it comes to fuel costs and maintenance costs. So that kind of it's either going to be less or it's going to sort of offset that increased insurance cost.
Anybody else?
Again, the word substantial is very vague.
I think we've seen numbers anywhere
numbers
from
on it. You don't really know what that means, but everything that Jessica said, I definitely agree with. And it comes to, imagine, I don't know if a fender bender is much more difficult to get fixed in an EV versus a regular combustion engine vehicle. I know with all the technology in there and stuff, there's lots of chips that could get broken, fried, wires that get ripped out, stuff like that. And I can only imagine that the cost to fix an EV, in this case, the word substantial does make sense, would be substantially more to repair a vehicle back to 100% with an electric vehicle than it would be in a regular combustion engine vehicle.
Alex.
Yeah, basically everything they said. The only other thing I could possibly add to that, well, two things. One would be body work. Like if a Tesla is using aluminum body panels, that could just cost more to fix and they may have to replace entire components. And two would be roadside assistance. Some of the different programs and things that you may need to offer as an insurance company for electric vehicle owners, it may just differ and the cost may be higher. So to offer the same level of thing.
Like portable charging.
Yes, exactly. So to be able to acquire and then service those types of needs and those resources, it may just be a greater burden on the insurance companies, and therefore you pay a higher premium. But as Jessica mentioned, that can be offset by the cost of general ownership of an EV. So
yeah, I'm going to put a number on it. I've seen the average. A lot of folks have written articles and looked into this more in depth than we have, and they're using numbers like 25 to 30% more expensive. But then again, that's about the price premium you're paying for the vehicle. So that makes it's actually more linear with the price of the vehicle, I think, than anything else.
Yeah, that's definitely true, John.
I'm going to wrap this up and thank you all. Jessica Ray, our digital producer, our road test producer, Kyle Scanlon, Alexander Kellum, or Alex, as we call him affectionately around the office, our assistant writer. Thank you all for all of your great comments and inputs on this podcast. Once again, for everybody out there, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all of the condolences for Pat Goss that we've received. We've passed them on to his family, and he will be missed, but I know that he will live on our YouTube .com/MotorWeek channel for decades to come. Go ahead,
John,
Jessica.
yeah, I have one thing while you're sort of talking about this. This weekend, we are running a retro review marathon on our YouTube channel. So there will be plenty of old road tests, etc. But of course, also plenty of retro Goss's Garage segments. If you're feeling sentimental, it's going to start streaming on our YouTube channel at 8 a.m. Eastern time on Saturday, April the 2nd. And it will run for 48 hours straight. It is season 17, which is the years of 1997 and 1998. So we hope that you guys come and join us this weekend.
Well said. Thanks to everybody out there. If you want more Motor Week, please go to our website, motorweek.org. If you're looking for the public television station in your area, pull down the tab at the top about the show, put in your zip code, you'll get the latest listings, or you can go over to our cable partner at mavtv.com and pull down their schedule. Those folks have been showing us quite a few times a week. So if you have a digital screen of any variety, you can find Motor Week. Till next time, I'm John Davis. On behalf of everyone at Motor Week, thank you for being a part of Motor Week.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil, TireRack.com, and RockAuto.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.